We are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll welcome you to the special city council meeting. And Mr. Deputy Clerk, have you taken the roll call?
Through the chair, roll call has been taken.
All right. Does any member of council have a conflict of interest they need to declare regarding items on our agenda today? Seeing no raised hands, just gotta click here. So we'll move right into the first item, which is education training session. And as per section 15.6.3 city's procedural bylaw, that limits the presentation to 10 minutes and really doesn't permit questions. So I'm going to suggest, unless anyone objects, that we go beyond that and those two rules don't apply. The idea is we're going to spend about an hour in this, and for our integrity commissioner, I don't think it would be appropriate to limit him to 10 minutes given the subject matter he has to cover. So not seeing any raised hands objecting to that procedure. We'll move right in then to a presentation by Mr. Marvin Huberman. He is coming in virtually. There he is the Brantford panelist. Good afternoon, Marvin. You're going to give us the training session.
Good afternoon, Mayor Davis, and good afternoon, councillors. And I am indeed going to give it the presentation this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. Let me begin by giving the Integrity Commissioner Huberman's top 10 tips for municipal councillors. I have other ones, but we'll limit the ones today to the top 10 that I have prepared, and then we'll move into the substantive part that will back up these pieces of advice. The first one is know your duties, responsibilities, and rights as a municipal councillor. The second is understand your roles, and I emphasize roles. We'll see in a moment you have several roles to play as a municipal councillor. The third is be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. No matter what you do in your rights and roles and responsibilities and fulfillment of your duties, you have to be prepared. And hopefully the latter part of what I have to say today will help in that regard. Number 4, ask questions. There's no shame in asking questions. And in fact, asking questions was probably the best thing you can do throughout your professional careers. And I think it's probably prudent to do that at any time when you don't feel you understand something fully. Number 5, when appropriate, say, I just don't know. And of course, in my litigation practice for the last 40 years, that's a critical point to say in front of a court or jury or whoever you're talking to. If you don't know, say you don't know. And rather than guess or give an inaccurate or misleading answer. Number 6, actively listen. We hear a lot about that these days, about how people should be more engaged as listeners and so on and so forth. There's a concept out there called active listening. You basically have to really fully engage, empathize, and sit down and instead of talking, listen. And you'll gain more than you would otherwise if you were speaking, because you can't do both at the same time. Number 7, value teamwork and consensus building with those with whom you associate in your professional lives as counselors. Number 8, be grateful and show your appreciation, particularly to city officers and employees and staff. And that will go a long way in helping you enjoy your work as municipal councillors and to be effective at it. Number 9, recognize the training. And by that, I mean, you all know you have mandatory training sessions you have to attend. There's also optional training. And then there's, of course, professional upgrading and maintenance and so on and so forth. Train as much as you possibly can. Certainly the mandatory training is obligatory, and the optional training, in my view, should be viewed just the same way. if you have an opportunity to train and upgrade and make yourselves better at what you do, then you should do it and recognize how important that really is. And then lastly, and this is something, of course, would be expected from your integrity commissioner, always act in an ethical manner, which is just a fancy way of saying do the right thing. And if you have any questions about what the right thing to do is, there's already an issue, right? And if you have to clarify your stance on something and make sure that you do the right thing and the ethical thing, so you can ask. And you can ask me, you can ask others, you can ask each other, and so on and so forth. If you ask me, you can ask me informally under your code, the new code of conduct we'll talk about shortly, or you can ask me formally. And that's a whole other procedure under the code where you'd ask me in writing, I'd give you an answer in writing, and so on, and certain consequences flow from that. But the bottom line is that if you're interested, and you ought to be interested in doing the right thing professionally as a counselor, then you're going to have to, I think, adhere to some or all of these tips, and you'll all be the more effective counselors if you do. I'll leave the issue of any questions you might have towards the end, if that's okay. And let me move on to, we'll look at three documents, or I'll refer to three documents, and maybe a fourth, which we probably won't deal with today, and you'll see which one I'm going to leave out for today, but we can always have other sessions if you're so inclined. The first document is something that I've seen for years, but it's we're all fortunate there's a 2022 version out there. It's called the Ontario Municipal Councillors Guide. In 2022, many of you, I think, have seen it. I've certainly talked to a few of you about it in private and informally. It's a wonderful guide that's out there, and you can get it just simply by Googling Ontario Municipal Councillors Guide 2022, and it'll come up. So essentially there, without reiterating what's in there, what's important for you, of course, is the various roles, as I mentioned to you, that you should really understand and get to know. You need to understand the role of council. That's Section 224 of the Municipal Act 2001, otherwise known as just the Municipal Act of Ontario. There's a role of the head of council, which is fulfilled by, in your case, Mayor Davis, Section 225 of the Act. You've got the roles of councillors, okay, and that's all of you. And as I said before, you have several roles. One is a representative role. The other is a policy-making role. And the third is a stewardship role. They're all set out in the statute, and they're all important, and that comprises what you folks do in your professional roles as municipal councillors. There's examples in here, there's points that are set out well, and I encourage you all to get the guide, read it, and understand it. It's important for you to also understand the role of staff, which is set out in Section 227 of the Municipal Act. And then, of course, there's council-staff relationship and roles, and you are intertwined, so to speak, in your day-to-day activities as professional counselors. So those are also important considerations, and there's some samples that are given in the guide as well, and you should be mindful of those as well. Further than that, the guide also gets into other things like strategic planning, succession planning, so on and so forth. The second big thing in the guide that is very important for you and for me is the accountability and transparency provisions, which under Section 224, that's one of your roles as counselors, which is to ensure accountability and transparency. And it's a priority in maintaining public trust. So that's important, and sort of what flows from that essentially from your perspective and mine is that there's an obligation to establish a code of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. And then which ensures access to an integrity commissioner, which is me. And then there's also a certain Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and open meeting requirements that are discussed in here as well. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and the open meeting requirements is something that I'm not going to deal with today, unless there's a question or two on that at the end. But I will focus on the code of conduct for members and local boards, and also I'm going to be talking about the next important thing as well as part of the accountability and transparency is your procurement, or sort of your procedure bylaw, which plays into your daily lives in council as well. And I'll talk more about that soon. Okay, so let's get right into the new code of conduct, which came in a few years ago, was passed, and is in force as we speak. That's chapter 16, which is the code of conduct for members of council, the city of Brantford and its local boards. What's important to note here is just by way of overview is the authority for the code is established under the accountability, and it's really part 5.1, the accountability and transparency of the Municipal Act 2001, that mandated that you have a code of conduct. There's regulations under the act that prescribes what your code must contain. Other things are optional, which you do have in it. And I must say, I'm impressed with the code that you've promulgated and that is out there. I think it's clear, concise, and it does the job. So what's important for you to understand in the code is its application. It applies to all of you as councillors and members of local boards of the city. You're required to observe and comply with its principles. Its purpose is set out in it. And it also supplements a number of statutes. I think there are about 7 or 8, maybe 7, including the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the Human Rights Code, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and the Criminal Code of Canada. These are all important statutes, and they all, in one way, shape, or the other, have some implications for your conduct as councillors. And if you have any questions about the application of any of these acts, you should find out, research it, or as I say, if you feel like giving me a call or reach out to me to ask some questions about it, I'm happy to be there for you and answer any questions you might have. What's important about this code, of course, is its application to you and to others that are members of the of council. The definitions speak for themselves. I think that's another section you should be reading very carefully. That's Article 16.1.11. It's got a whole host of definitions, which of course are what inform the substantive provisions of the code and give it distinct meaning and definition. So it's important to know when you're referring to a section in the code what the meaning is in the as defined. So we have that, and then ultimately what the code does is it has a number of articles. I'm only going to highlight what they are so that they'll be there to be framed. One, of course, is avoidance of conflict of interest. That's Article 2. It speaks for itself. You've got Article 3, which deals with gifts, benefits, and hospitality, and has definitions about how you deal with gifts. You've got Article 4, which deals with member expenses, and that speaks for itself as well. Use of city resources is Article 6. Article 7 deals with your election campaigns. And by the way, congratulations to those who have been re-elected and for the newly elected ones as well. I guess that particular moment has passed, and until the next time, some of these election campaign issues will become less relevant for you now that you're in incumbents and you're sitting as counselors. Of course, Article 8 talks about improper influence and respect for decisions of council, just to name a few points in the section. Article 9 talks about business relations. You shall not act as a paid agent. That's a very small one, but important one to note, as it says there. And then Article 10 is the member conduct generally, and it has provisions that deal with how you're supposed to conduct yourself at council, local board and committee meetings. It deals with social media, which is important and has come up a few times, as you all know, in some of the complaints that have come before me, and how members are to deal with or not deal with social media. As well, Article 11 is the article that deals specifically with me as the Integrity Commissioner. And it talks about you can ask for some advice in writing. That's the more formal way of communicating with me than the less formal way, which, by the way, is on the second page of the code in Article 16.1.9, where you can ask for clarification and I can give you training. That's in part what we're doing today. Article 12 is important only in the sense that what it sets out is the complaint and application procedures. So if somebody wants to make a complaint under the code or under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and or both, then you would follow this article. There's two processes. One is formal and the other is informal. And the formal one is the one where it could result in an inquiry, which I would conduct or choose not to conduct. The provisions are there. And the specific rules and procedures and whatnot, which would culminate in a report from me or no report from me, and the form that needs to be filled out and so on and so forth, which is an affidavit, and which is on the very last page of the code, page 29. There's a form there. All of that is set out in the code of conduct, and is what is applied by me and also by the clerk, the deputy clerk, those who are administering this, the intake people at ADR Integrity would be complying with and following the procedures set out in this code and in the provisions. And again, it's informed by the Municipal Act and those sections that relate to accountability and transparency, including those provisions that specifically deal with me as the Integrity Commissioner. So that's the high-level code review that I wanted to just sort of put out there that will help all of you understand what your roles and responsibilities are. And certainly if you're concerned about prospective conduct that may run afoul of the code, that's something you can inquire about. Or most commonly, way it comes to me is somebody initiates a formal complaint through the code of the provisions of the code of conduct, and it comes through ADR Integrity to me through your clerk or deputy clerk, and then it's looked at, and whether it's proceeded with it leads to a full inquiry or not remains to be seen. There's a number of considerations in terms of intake and whether or not this is an appropriate complaint, whether it's frivolous and vexatious, whether or not there's a more appropriate statute or provision that this thing should be dealt with through, whether it involves the police. There's a host of different considerations that go through this before it actually gets vetted and leads to where it would land on my desk, and I would then embark on an inquiry. And even if I do, depending on what my disposition is, it may or may not come to a formal report. And whether it comes to council with a formal report, with a recommendation of some kind of recommendation, which is usually either a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period of time, or something different that you might take on or not take on. That again is very factually unique, and it depends on the context of each and every complaint, if it makes it that far. Let's put it that way. Okay, so that's the overview on the code. The third document that I feel is important for you to made mention of it here is the Chapter 15, your procedure bylaw. Now, of course, Mayor Davis knows well about this because he's the chair, and under the procedure bylaw, that's how the meetings are to be conducted. With the procedure bylaw being followed. So here, what's important to note is Article 2, and essentially the general rule is unless council authorizes the application of alternative procedures, this chapter, which is the Chapter 15, the procedure bylaw, applies to proceedings to the municipal council of the city of Brantford, the committees created or continued under the chapter, and with necessary modification to all boards and advisory committees created under Chapter 26 of the code, and task forces created by council. So it applies to a whole host of different procedures and meetings and so on and so forth, unless council decides otherwise. And Article 15.2.2 says that council shall fulfill all of the statutory obligations of a municipal council, including a whole bunch of things that are in there. It's pretty wide in its scope. So what you have is that you've got obviously statutory obligations that we've talked about already that are sourced in the statutes themselves. But you've also got a procedural bylaw, which basically says you're also obligated to comply with all your statutory obligations as well as part of this. Now, the other couple of provisions in here that I think are important to make mention of are Article 7, which is the conduct of the meetings. And of course, this you've got the chair's duties, which are set out in there, including what Mayor Davis did as well at the beginning of this meeting, which is to call it to order and the business and all. There's a whole host of things that are set out in the procedure bylaw and that need to be complied with. As well, the chair is to preserve decorum. And then there's a number of rules that are the rules of decorum at meetings. And so you should most certainly familiarize yourselves well with the decorum rules and the speaking order, the points of order, so on and so forth. So when you're in meetings, there's specific rules and procedures that need to be followed in the meetings. And those who understand these rules and can apply them have certainly an advantage. And I would say you need to do this if you're going to be in the business of sitting as a municipal councillor, because these are the rules of the road, so to speak, of engagement. And these are your life and blood when you're conducting meetings and trying to engage in debates and discussions and having meetings with decorum and so on and so forth. They are set out in here as well. What's most important here as well is that the chair under Article 15.7.9 has the power to expel any person other than a member for improper conduct at a meeting. So that's something that from time to time does get used, I suppose. And then there's also other rules that go on beyond that for members and so on and so forth. So these are the rules that need to be mastered, I would say, and adhered to in particular. So there's that. And then lastly, Article 17 of this procedure bylaw talks about particularly 15.17.1. It talks about the purposes of the act, which include accountability and transparency, and those are applied to these sort of things as well. And it again reiterates that the council of the municipality acknowledges that it is responsible for providing good government for its stakeholders in an accountable and transparent manner, et cetera, and how you achieve it and the methods of that you do it and so on and so forth. So these are all extremely important provisions of this particular procedure bylaw. They have to be adhered to and lived in actuality and reality and in spirit. And it's also important to know that the code of conduct links the two. So to comply with the code of conduct means you have to also comply in this respect for sure for decorum and other things like that with the procedural bylaw. So that if you run afoul of the procedural bylaw or improper conduct at a meeting, whether the chair rules you out of order or not, it's a different issue. But it may be that the conduct that offends the procedure bylaw in the respect of decorum and proper conduct may well also constitute a violation of the code of conduct as well, which may lead to an informal or a formal complaint under the code of conduct. So all of these things are important to understand and know, and basically know where the bright red lines are and where the leeway is, and where the road goes and where it ends. These are all important things to know. Now, the fourth document that I will mention but not get into in any great detail is the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. That in itself is a whole session that we can, if you wish, get into, but not today. Today was by way of more of introduction, a little bit of training on the key points that particularly the new councillors, newly elected councillors should be aware of. This is also an important statute and can result in its breach, it can result in some serious consequences for councillor under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, otherwise known as the MCIA. It has its own time limit, 6 weeks from the time when you become aware of someone complaining about a potential problem with the conflict of interest under this act, which is really financial, it's pecuniary interest. We really won't get into this stuff in any detail, but suffice it to say that members, all of you as members, are required under the statute to comply with its terms, and it has serious consequences for its violation. I just want to say that that's one of the statutes you should be taking out and reading. And if you do want some additional specific training on that, I'm happy to oblige. You just have to let me know. Okay, so that's the overview. Those are the top 10 tips I thought I'd frame this discussion with. What I'd like to do is, if we can, I'm happy to any questions that you have. I know that you have some other pressing business after this session, and I deliberately wanted to keep it short and sweet, but I'm happy to entertain any specific questions you might have about any of the topics that I've talked about.
Thank you very much, Marvin. We'll see if any of the members have questions. I'm not seeing any raised hands here at our end, Marvin. So, oh, sorry. There you go. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Marvin. Nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you too.
The world's changed with social media and such, and there's a lot more scrutiny on municipal councils. Are you finding a lot more complaints, frivolous or vexatious or otherwise, coming your way as a result of this new social media activity?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think social media is a challenge for not only councillors and city councils and so on and so forth. It's really a challenge for society at large, young, intermediate and older people as well. You've got a lot of political pressure. You've got media using this, abusing it. You've got people using it, abusing it. You've got definitional problems about what exactly is it, what's objectionable about it, how far can you go with the use of it. I myself have written a couple of decisions for Brantford about the use of social media and what it means to like something that's been posted or share it or so on and so forth. So it is a very thorny issue. I think society is really challenged by it and the internet generally, and now we've got even more complicated things with this AI and this chat GPT stuff that's going on with schools and how students work and do their homework and essay writing, and even in universities and whatnot, and in graduate schools. These are social media and internet and all this new stuff is really, I think, creating a lot of challenges, opportunities, yes, but challenges and dangers as well. So yeah, I find myself am challenged and will be challenged with this, as try to put this all in perspective and draw really boxes around what is really a moving target. So yes, I think that's fair to say, but I also think it's fair to say that your code of conduct also addresses social media in Article 10 in 16.10.4, and it does have some pretty good definitions of things that relate to that as well. So I think that's at least a start for sure.
Would it be worthwhile to have a session with you and council on the conflict of interest and maybe social media awareness and procedures?
I mean, I think that would be certainly good topics to talk about. I'm in your hands if those are the sort of things that council or a group of council want to talk with me about. I'm happy to engage.
And just one more thing, Marvin, if I may. So if we're in a council meeting and council members are treating staff inappropriate, is that something that would be a point of order by a member of council if the chair doesn't recognize it or maybe didn't hear it?
Well, I guess there's two times when it could come up. If it comes up during a meeting, then yeah, the chair does have the authority and the obligation to obviously make sure decorum is in place and proper conduct is being followed. But outside of that, there's still an obligation for members, if you're talking about a member, to treat each other with respect and decorum and so on and so forth in the code. So as well as in the procedure bylaw. So if you can find a section in the code where the conduct at issue may or may not contravene that section, that could well be a matter for the integrity commissioner if it involves the application of the conduct to the potential breach of conduct in the code or the procedure bylaw. Yes.
Does some responsibility fall on the other members of council, though? If, for example, a member of council is talking demeaning in a demeaning way to a member of staff at a council meeting or any public meeting that we're involved in, does some responsibility fall on the rest of the members of council to speak up and say something?
Well, again, one of my top 10 tips was do the right thing. So if and which means act in an ethical way. You don't necessarily always have to have, a section of a code or something that speaks directly to the conduct at issue. I think if there, and then again, it depends on how it's done and when. If it's the chair's job to run the meeting with decorum, then of course the chair has the duties to do what he or she is obligated to do. In terms of whether individual members that are not serving as chairs at a meeting see something that isn't copacetic, it's not sitting right, it's offensive or whatever. I mean, I would think from a personal integrity point of view, or you could in the appropriate fashion, raise a point of order and see if it's recognized. I guess you'd have to comply with the procedural bylaw number 1, but if it is something which can be raised appropriately, so I would think you do raise it appropriately and then see where it might go. But what I'm saying is whether to what extent it goes there at the time is one issue, but does it have consequences beyond the meeting, irrespective of somebody speaks up at the time and sides with the person who's been offended or otherwise, is a different issue.
Thank you, Marvin. I appreciate you being our integrity commissioner very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, any other questions? Marvin, I've got a specific question for you. It's a little bit down in the weeds. It has to do with the code of conduct in the section concerning gifts, which probably of greater concern to the mayor because the mayor will often receive gifts. So if the gift is, and the limit there is $100. So if the gift is to the office and say it's a piece of art or something and will be displayed and will remain as property of the office of the mayor, is it appropriate to receive gifts? So you're really receiving them on behalf of the office or on behalf of the city, but the value exceeds $100. Would that be copacetic?
Right. So you're saying, is this nominal or below the 100 or not?
Well, it's above 100. Let's say it's a print. It's an art print.
Okay.
Okay, and it's listed and recorded as a gift to the city, really to the office of the mayor. Is that appropriate?
Well, yeah, if you comply with the rest of the disclosure statement, the gift registry, all that sort of thing, then it's never a problem if you comply with the disclosure requirements, right? So you accept it, recorded in the gift disclosure statement, the gift registry, and then you've complied with that. And then, of course, there's the gifts for the benefit of the city, right? So then you have to leave it with the records division of the city's clerk department when you cease to hold office and so on and so forth, right? Now, let me just double check, Mayor Davis, about the above the nominal value. Let me just see here. It says here, yeah, well, 16.3.4 talks about gifts above the nominal value. And it says, unless otherwise permitted pursuant to this article, gifts above a nominal value, which I believe is $100, shall not be accepted without the Integrity Commissioner's specific approval. You see? So, yeah. So there is an article where it allows for me to look at this and give the approval for that if it's above the $100 nominal value.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Not seeing any other questions. So Marvin, thank you very much for taking the time to, oh, sorry, Councilor Carpenter, you just
No,
wave?
I'm sorry. I was just waving by. Sorry.
All right. So I want to thank you very much for attending virtually to provide the training session. And I made note of your suggestion, but we might, in response to Councilor Carpenter's question, we might consider a specialized training session later this winter or spring regarding social media, which would actually be quite interesting, and potentially the Conflict of Interest Act. So I'll take that up with staff, and perhaps we'll be seeing you again shortly. If not, I'm sure you do hear on a sort of semi-regular basis from councillors. I know from the past counselors that were new to council that your advice to them, which was sought periodically, was I think of real benefit to them and some comfort that they had someone they could speak to in confidence, and that obviously had a degree of expertise to be able to answer their questions, and either have them assure them that what they're doing is appropriate, or if not, that you steer them in the right direction. So much appreciated.
Okay, well, thank you all for the opportunity, and I'm happy to work with you in the future, and I look forward to participating in a training session on any topic, including social media or any other topic, Municipal Conflict of Interest Act or otherwise. And thank you again.
Again, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, so we'll move on to item 4.1. I believe this is a motion to move in camera to deal with personnel issues. So Councillor McCreary, I understand you have the motion to move this in camera. Would you please read the motion, state your second?
That's correct, Mayor, and Councillor Martin is my seconder. Reads as follows: that we move in camera to consider the following 4.1 options to fill the CAO position on an interim basis. And we're in camera because it's a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations, or employee negotiations.
So any debate or discussion about the motion to move in camera? Not seeing any raised hands. Clerk, if you please take the vote on this.
Yes. That was a yes for you. The motion to move in camera carries unanimously on recorded votes. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sokoli, Sullivan, and Mayor Davis.
So thank you very much. We'll then take a short recess. We'll reconvene in the Charlie Wardroom, and Councillor Carpenter, if you join, please in camera using the link you've been provided.